Okay, this is chapter 13 of the Zodiac, Andrew Todd Walker, April 1970. It was early in 1970 when the police became aware of Andy Walker. This name has been changed. A highway patrolman had become involved in a cat-and-mouse game with a man in a new green Ford. It was a hot day. The two cars were parked on opposite plateaus facing each other, the freeway traffic passing below and between them. The patrolman could tell the Ford driver in the elated lot across the freeway was watching him. He decided to check the stranger out. He backed out of the lot and made his way around to an underpass to take him over to the other side of the highway. When he got there, the lot was deserted. He looked across the freeway to the other side, and there was the green Ford parked where his patrol car had been. While the highway patrolman was on his way over, the man had taken the overpass and reversed places with him. 2 days later, the man was back again. This went on for several weeks. The man had done nothing, but the patrolman was curious. On the long, scorching days, the two cars would park facing each other, a stream of traffic roaring between them. Each time the patrolman would cross over, the green car would trade places with him. One day, the patrolman parked in the lot on Hunter Hill. Suddenly, the new dark green Ford LTD four-door entered the lot, drove up alongside, and parked so close that the door of neither car could have been opened. The patrolman estimated 2 inches separated the vehicles. The patrolman couldn't believe anyone would try to pick a fight with a highway patrolman in full uniform parked in a CHP car. He felt the man was staring at him, but decided to ignore him. Finally, he turned to look right at the other driver. The stranger's deep, close-set, penetrating blue eyes radiated a glare of sheer hatred. "I've never had such an experience in my life," he told me later. He was like in an epileptic seizure, that contorted face, scary. And that's how the patrolman met Andy Walker. Walker was a middle-aged man who had an enormous face like a gray owl's and tight, thin lips. Though his hairline was high, he had an abundant crop of hair going to gray. He wore dark-rimmed glasses, had a pot-belly, weighed over 200 pounds, and stood 6 feet tall. In 1971, Vallejo Sergeant Leigh Lunbold had him as one of the suspects in connection with the murder of Darlene Ferrin. Wednesday, May 1st, 1974. "I've known for a long time who the Zodiac is," said the Mexican-looking black man. "He's not in his 20s or 30s, as the police say. This guy's between 44 to 54, and he's gone from his home 2 nights a week. He always wears Wing Walker shoes." 3 men stood in the evening shadows of a Vallejo stable. One man was the speaker, a civil worker. The other 2 men were friends, a Napa bowling alley worker and the highway patrolman. The patrolman did some checking on Walker. He discovered Walker lived in a remote area. Since Walker had once been a suspect in the Zodiac case and had exhibited such hatred of the police, the highway patrolman was encouraged and continued his investigation. At the same time, a pretty young school teacher got her 4th anonymous phone call at the apartment complex in Vacaville, just southeast of Vallejo, where she lived. It was the same as the others, just the sound of rushing wind on the other end of the line. Frightened, she decided to visit her boyfriend in Dixon, near Sacramento, on Silvelleville Road. She stayed 3 days. When she did return home, she took the phone off the hook. On Monday, she came home to find a letter addressed to her. From the envelope, the teacher could tell it was from someone who didn't know her very well. "It's like it is on my mailbox and in the phone book," she said. She shakily told police much later. "Just my first initial and last name." The letter to her read, "I watch you a lot and call you a lot. I saw you in Davis and Sylvie Road in Dixon. I'm pretty angry because your telephone doesn't ring at night. Bad things will happen if you don't let it ring." The teacher was mystified. The writer mentioned seeing her everywhere save the place she was employed, the elementary school in Cordelia, where she taught 7th and 8th grade. Badly frightened now, the teacher got in her car and drove all the way to El Sorbonte to stay with her parents. In the middle of the night, the phone rang at her parents' house. There was only the same sound of wind on the other end of the line. Saturday, May 11, 1974. The next unsigned letter the teacher got came to her at her parents' house. It read, "It's hard to watch you and call when you have an unlisted number. I don't like that." The writer had crumpled up the letter and then carefully and successfully smoothed it out to get rid of the fingerprints. C.I. and I in Sacramento said the printing in the letters was very, very contrived, and that the writer was trying to appear to be an 8th or 9th grade student by using poor grammar and printing. The woman who managed the Vacaville apartment building had seen a dark green 4-door Ford parked at the rear of the complex, a sloppily dressed man behind the wheel. He had been there for several afternoons. Once in April, he had come to the manager's door pretending to gather information. He asked a few questions and then drove off. He was very unkempt and had a pot-belly. He did not appear very businesslike, the manager said. The police were interested because a teacher had been receiving letters matching Zodiac's M.O., and a man resembling their strongest Zodiac suspect had been seen watching the complex. Police decided to find out if the man who spoke to the apartment manager was Walker. In itself, this would prove nothing more than the possibility that Walker was misrepresenting himself. It would not prove that Walker was writing anonymous letters to the teacher or was Zodiac. Placing him at the apartment building would at least provide a link. They arranged for the apartment complex manager to see Walker at a weekly meeting he attended. She identified him from a group of 25 people. "He's so neat tonight," she said, "but he's definitely the same man who came to my door." The Vallejo detectives were excited now. The civil worker had made an accusation against Walker as a Zodiac killer, and here was a suspect possibly involved in a case of anonymous threatening letters similar to the Zodiac letters to the press. In addition, police were studying the report on Walker's suspicious activities in parking lots. Zodiac was always connected to cars and parking areas. Police realized that Walker could conceivably be the man who was asking questions about Darlene at Terry's. On their own time, several investigators began looking into this man. These detectives, 2 policemen, and a federal investigator, have asked me not to use their names. A 17-page confidential report on Walker was prepared, entitled, "What? Another Zodiac Suspect." Over coffee at the home of one of the detectives, I was allowed to read and copy the report. Over the years, I was to run across this report again and again in such disparate places as Berkeley PD and the office of a famous female private detective. Before I left, I discussed the report with them in detail. The investigators told me about the photographs that Linda, Darlene's sister, had been shown in San Jose. She picked out Walker, they said. The way she put it was that he was most likely the same man who was terrorizing Darlene in the months before her death. She told us she had seen this man twice, once in February 1969 at Terry's, and once in May 1969, the painting party. The detectives were heartened by this. I later learned that others were skeptical that this man was Walker. Darlene's friend, Bobby Ramos, said she did not believe it was Walker. Lynch told me he did not believe it was Walker either. Finally, Darlene's sister, Pam, expressed doubts that he was the man. I spoke with Linda much later about it. Vallejo policeman Steve Baldino, a close friend of Darlene's, had been at the party and picked out Walker as having been there. Steve was pretty shook up over all this, Linda said. He knew the family, he was a really good cop, and when Darlene died, he went overboard a little bit trying to find her killer. The detectives had gotten their hands on the NSA cipher computer printout of one of Zodiac's codes and claimed that words that approximated Walker's name were repeated several times in the cryptogram. This evidently was the last line of the Zodiac cipher of July 31st, 1969. I was swamped out by the rain we had a while back, Zodiac had written. The area of Walker's house was flooded at the time of Zodiac's letter, and the detectives had secured photos to prove it. Peek through the pines, said a Zodiac card. One of the detectives explained to me that Walker lived in a grove of pine trees in an isolated section. You can't even see the house until you get up close enough to peer through the pine trees, which are in long rows. I looked at the photos of Walker's house that they had taken and saw that the water had come up over the road and had piled banks of mud near the center. The entire area had, I found out when I visited it, in spite of the green pines, a desolate chill to it. They then began to mention a long list of connections between Walker and the Zodiac murders and letters. We can connect him to the Sierra Club. Zodiac had mentioned the Sierra Club on the same card he mentioned peeking through the pines. The investigators had done extensive work on developing a Lake Berryessa connection. On the same day Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were attacked at the lake, a stalking man came into Moskowitz Corners General Store across from Pierce's Chevron service near the lake. He was nervous and was frantically asking anyone who would listen what the quickest way to leave the lake. The detectives had located a witness who was having lunch at the general store at the time, and he felt the man was acting highly unusual. He had even followed him out of the store and watched him get into a white automobile and drive away from the lake. He matched the description, they told me, of a man who had been watching some girls taking a sun bath near where Hartnell and Shepard were knifed. The police never found such a man or the car he was in. I told them I recalled the man seen at the lake was thought to be much younger than Walker. We brought our witness an assortment of photos, they continued, and bang, he picked our man out. He was the one he had seen at Moskowitz Corners. The following Tuesday, we took him to a group meeting so he could see Walker in the flesh. He wasn't totally certain that Walker was the same man. Our witness thought that Walker had dyed his hair. He did tell us that Walker's voice was almost exactly the same as the man asking directions the day of the Berryessa murder, and this was about 5 years after the death of Shepard. Unfortunately, we lost our witness 10 days after he was taken to see Walker. This was in an explosion. The witness's death was ruled an accident. Oh, and the Zodiac said that he was going to start making them accidents too. Oh, I don't think it was an accident. We all agreed that Walker met the general description of the Zodiac with the exception of age. The detectives had seen an employment form filled out by Walker and noted that their suspect had, in the years 1942 through 1945, taught code in the military service. He taught code for 2 years. He went right from a 7th-month stint in code school to being one of the teachers. He'd have to be pretty bright to do that. The detectives had checked Walker's records at Social Security and discovered that he had a card not only under his own name but 3 others. All of the Zodiac murders and letters were done while Walker was not working, and none during the periods of his employment. He is ambidextrous. I've seen this myself, I was told. The investigators also stressed Walker spent considerable time at Terry's restaurant during the time Darlene was a waitress there. This was just before she was killed. Officer Steve Bonaldo verified this. We know from DMV that Walker owned a 1961 4-door white Biscayne in 1968. As you know, this is the like design of the Impala. We know he's actively hostile toward law enforcement. They then told me about the incident with the highway patrolman. We know that he's altered the way he looks while at the apartment building of a teacher receiving threatening letters. We can connect him to at least 2 of the murders. He knew Farron and may have been at Berryessa. Walker is a hot-tempered guy, suffers from painful headaches, and has always had trouble working with women on the job. We were told this by his former supervisors. Walker finally admitted to spending many hours at Terry's, which of course was no proof that he had been the man harassing Darlene. The detectives then embarked on a series of schemes to get more evidence against the suspect, palm prints. The investigators had an associate wait near Walker's workplace. They had put casts on both of their friends' arms and placed a small and large goldfish bowl on a storefront ledge. As Walker approached on the way to work, the associate stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, sir, can you give me a hand with these fish bowls? My car is just down the street." Walker looked the man up and down. Then he looked at the two water-filled fish bowls. "I guess so," he said, picking up the large bowl. Walker hadn't held the fishbowl more than a few seconds when the man shouted, No, I meant the small one." The associate lunged forward, thrust the ends of both casts around the outer surface of the bowl as to not smudge the prints, and went sprinting off, splashing as he went and leaving behind a very perplexed Walker. Unfortunately, because of the water, no part of any print adhered to the glass surface. The 3 detectives' next scheme involved tailing Walker. Each weekend night, they waited in 2 autos in a grove near Walker's ranch house. One Friday, as they watched one of the Walker's cars, a 72 Dodge shot out of the tree-lined driveway, turned right, and roared off into the night, trailing a column of dust. Instantly, the investigators raced after the bronze car, lights off. "He knows we're here. Give it the gun. Go as fast as you can." However, Walker quickly outdistanced and then lost his pursuers. A half-hour later, the investigators returned and saw the Dodge parked in the driveway. Walker was leaning against the rear fender, smoking. The following week, the police arranged for Social Security to call Walker in on a pretext in order to gather handwriting samples. When he returned home, Walker told his wife about the visit and that he believed that they were trying to get some sort of evidence against me. He then told his wife about the ill-fated tailing accident. She reported this to the authorities. The next morning, the detectives were ordered by the judge to cease their harassment of Andrew Walker and close the case against him. The two investigators felt the odds were excellent that Walker was Zodiac. As they stressed at the conclusion of their report, there were only two good reasons why Walker had been refused as a suspect by the authorities up to this point. The first, they told me, was that his handwriting did not match the printing on the Zodiac letters. The detectives felt that not enough exemplars of handwriting had been compared and that the check should be redone. Secondly, Walker's fingerprints did not match the bloody print on the outside of Paul Stein's cab in San Francisco. The explanation advanced by the investigators was fairly far-fetched, but since they felt that Zodiac was a highly demented and warped individual, it would not be beyond his method of planning. He intended to leave fingerprints, they said. They were fingerprints, but not his own. I can't tell you how he accomplished this. We think it may have been with the use of reverse image prints or with the use of severed fingers from some victims we don't even know about. Whatever. He wanted to thumb his nose at the police. He has a special hatred of San Francisco's department. Think about it. In the murder of the San Francisco cabbie, he had worked out a meticulous plan. He carried off the killing, ripped off a piece of Stein's shirt to prove he was the killer, wiped down the vehicle, placed a getaway car within walking distance. I can't believe he would slip up and leave prints unless he had planned to. There was one last bizarre note. The detectives discovered on the posts and poles around the suspect's rural house and on his ranch's back gate hand-painted symbols in color. These were photographed by Polaroid cameras and sent to the Department of Justice. Enclosed are 5 photos of various signs photographed in a rural area. Please determine if the enclosed photographs represent signs in witchcraft. If so, please determine what each individual sign's significance is in witchcraft. Experts could not connect them to any known witchcraft symbols. I showed Walker's photo to the 3 teenagers who had witnessed the Stein murder. They thought that he was too old to be the killer. I now believe that Walker is not the Zodiac killer, but up to this point, almost 6 years after the Lake Herman Road murders, he was the best anyone had come up with.